see everybody, as always. Let me just check. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to the January 18th, 2024 meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in the city. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative from University of Michigan Student Legal Services. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, you will be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone, depending on your method of access to this meeting. We can give the instructions for that once the time comes. So we can move on to roll call, item 2. So I'm going to go through our roll here. Please state the city that you're calling from. I am calling from Ann Arbor. Commissioner Chen.
And I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
Nice to see you. Commissioner Kelly.
Hello, I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Droppelman.
Present and calling from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Else. Commissioner Else. I think maybe she stepped away. We'll look back around. Commissioner Tibbetts. Okay. Commissioner Rosen.
I'm here. I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. Sorry, I heard you guys talking about weather. I'm supposed to fly to Philadelphia tomorrow, and I was changing my flight because they're getting a storm. So, but yes, I'm here.
Okay. Commissioner Ratcliffe.
Here, calling in from Ann Arbor. Sorry, I'm brain dead now.
No worries. Welcome. Commissioner Pitts.
Here, calling from Ann Arbor.
Howdy. Commissioner Good.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Radina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Harrison is not here. Commissioner Else. Oh, did we lose her? Oh dear. Oh, okay. Just come back though. Okay, Commissioner Else is here, and I can tell is voting is calling in from Ann Arbor. I can recognize her office. Okay, we can move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. So, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Julia. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Rosanita. Okay. So all those in favor of approving our agenda, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, we approve our agenda. And I apologize. I think I'm having some connection issues. Just give me one moment. I'm going to change my network here. It's my hotspot. Sorry about that. Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
still a little bit slow on my end, so I apologize if I start lagging. Okay, we can move on to item 4, approval of last meeting's minutes. Oh, I see. We don't have them ready for this meeting, but have them for next month. Okay, so we're gonna have,
Yes.
yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
have to skip those. Yeah, thank you. No worries. So we'll move on to item 5, first general public comments.
All right. To address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes, you can call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941. To be called on to speak, callers can press *9 if listening by phone, or using the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. And the web link to get to the Zoom meeting is a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting. And so to address the Renters Commission, that's *9 to raise your hand, or you could use the raise hand feature in Zoom. So if anyone watching and listening would like to address the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand. No attendees have indicated.
Okay, thank you very much, Kristen. We can move on to item 6, old business. Let's see. We have 6-A, discussion of proposed changes to chapter 105. So we had a meeting of a subgroup of the commission to discuss the proposed changes to 8.531, and so it's 8.530 and 8.531, which are also known as early leasing ordinance and right to renew. Is anyone here who was at that meeting would like to give us an update on what was discussed? I can pull up the notes.
If you can pull up the notes, I can try to explain what we did.
Thank you.
But now I got to pull up the actual.
Oh, yeah, I can. Give me a second. I'll put them side by side.
Oh, that's very convenient. Thank you.
Okay, can you see that?
I can, yeah.
Great.
Right. So one of the things that we were concerned about, especially from a landlord perspective, is the idea of requiring landlords to send completed leases right away to tenants. So one of our suggested changes was that as long as the landlord lets tenants know whether or not there's any variations to the lease, like parking used to be included and now it's not included or something like that, what the change in the rent price will be and what the dates are, we thought that would be good and would make it easier for landlords so they don't have to put together the whole lease, which takes some time. Section 2. Thank you, Zach. I don't remember what that note means. We're concerned about landlords not countersigning to it. Oh, right. We wanted to make sure that once a tenant returns, is that right? We wanted to make sure that once a tenant returns the lease, that the landlord has a certain amount of time by which they have to countersign it and send it back. jump in, anybody, if I'm missing anything. 3B, it says, one of the, where did it go? Was it below that? Yeah, that if one of the things that it included was that if a tenant by their own free will terminates the lease agreement, that the landlord doesn't have to give notice. And we're not really sure what that means of their own free will, like what's required of that. So we wanted a little bit more so that landlords don't try to pressure tenants into making a decision right away. We're concerned that landlords are often too. Oh yeah, I think I maybe talked about this before, that we had a landlord situation where so leases that are 8 months or less are not covered by the right to renew ordinance. So we had a couple landlords, I think, offering tenants 2 6-month leases rather than a full year lease to try to skirt the ordinance. And we wanted to see what can be done. We were trying to come up with some language for how to avoid landlords being able to do that. We wanted to add that landlords can't, instead of landlords have to just give a second notice, if they give an earlier notice, we wanted to make it so that landlords can't make an offer before 210 days, and that might help with the early bird special issue. I think that's it on the early leasing ordinance. Does anybody want to add anything or tell me I'm not making sense? I'm happy to try to clarify. Okay. And then on 8531, which is the right to renew ordinance, again, we're concerned about the 8-month language, the same as before. And just wondering why we're referencing 85302 here in section 4, because it references, there isn't a timeline for the tenant to accept. So we're wondering if that needs to be in that spot there. I think that's it, right? So
Yeah,
I guess, and one of the things, John, that you had talked about, I think at some point, was the idea of combining the two ordinances, the ELO and the right to renew, and wondering if that's still something that's being considered. But I think that's it. Unless Zachariah, Julia, anybody has anything to add. I can't see everybody, so I don't know who else was there. It's kind of quiet, so I think we're good.
You're fine. I was there. This is Kim.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't
Hi.
see you on my screen.
It's fine.
Anything to add, Kim?
No. I think we're good.
great. Do we have any questions or comments about these two ordinances and the proposed amendments to them? I see Travis's hand, and then I know it looks like John, you want to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to give everyone a minute to say something there, and I didn't see anybody jumping at it. So I also just wanted to thank everybody for putting some time into making some additional recommendations and potential changes here. I know John and I spoke this afternoon, and Cynthia and I are going to regroup and kind of look at all of this and then try to bring something to council here in the very near future. So hopefully we can continue to kind of close these loopholes and strengthen this ordinance and get a better product that's protecting renters in a better way. So thanks everybody for your continued work in this space.
Thanks, John.
And I agree. Thank you very much for getting together, meeting again on behalf of the Renters Commission and tenants to look this over and for sharing the feedback. If you have additional feedback or specific examples? Like, is the 2 6-month leases, is that a common thing? Is that becoming a thing? Does that happen often?
It
And then
will if it works. I mean, I think if it works for landlords to avoid the right to renew ordinance by having 2 consecutive leases, I suspect it'll start working more. Right now, I think we've only seen a couple landlords do it.
Okay, all right. And then with respect to you would rather have just the terms or certain things, any differences like under 830 section 1, any variations to the lease, rent, price, and dates? Why the preference? Is that just to save on paperwork or the hassle, or I'm just curious why that comment?
I think Jordan can speak to that better. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I've been struggling lately, so I can't talk too much without coughing, but I'll try to briefly. I mean, the amount of time that would go into say you have 50% renewals. I mean, you would literally spend multiple work days for most of us that have a decent amount of volume making up leases that were not going to be used. And to me personally, having been a renter, if I got my renewal came with a lease, I would feel additional pressure, I guess, to sign it. So I think our hope is that there's a way to get the tenants the information without, kind of putting an additional burden on the landlords in a way that they're not going to follow it at all, right? Like we need to make sure that we aren't overburdening the landlords in this process where they're just not going to follow it or they're going to come up with ways around it, right? We've seen that. Yeah, so handing them the lease and saying, hey, do you want to renew? Here's your lease, just seems A, like a waste of time, and B, like an additional level of pressure that I don't think is helpful when we have specified what needs to be included, when it needs to be returned, et cetera. And while I'm on, I'll just say one other thing that I think working through this with all of us just highlighted like how much we also need to address the waitlist thing, right? Because this, we have all of this verbiage and it just has morphed into students being taken advantage of in that other way with really high waitlist fees and unclear policies on that. And so I think the more that time I spend thinking about like how we make these stronger, if we're not also going to address that issue of tenants being asked to pay thousands up front for the chance of even having an apartment, we still really aren't doing a service to these students. But that's where the lease thing specifically came from, John.
Thanks, Jordan. Oh, I'm sorry, John, did you want to respond to that?
No, I think Travis was going to say something about wait list and a potential 8532 that we didn't talk about tonight.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah. Cynthia and I are also working with John on a draft to ban junk fees. And so the waitlist fees would be included in that. And so that is something we hope to be bringing to you guys in the near future as well. So that is very much on the radar and hope to have something for you relatively soon.
Terrific. Thank you. John?
So with respect to the first comment regarding any variations to the lease, could I get a sense of what changes to a lease that landlords usually do that doesn't involve the term, i.e. the dates and the price? Are there other changes that often occur? Like, are there additional fees or pet fees or cleaning fees or?
Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about. Big changes in fees or big things like all of a sudden our laundry machines are dead and we're not going to replace them. So this doesn't actually include access to laundry, or you no longer have access to a parking space. I mean, any of those things that would be a major change in the lease and affect the quality of life and the expectation. I mean, our hope with this language was that we can get students and renters in general to be informed. I mean, we want them to have the information so that they can make a complete decision. Usually there aren't a lot of changes, but occasionally there are. And I think the laundry and the parking were like the two major things that came up outside of the terms of, you know, the dates of the lease and the price.
Are fees ever increased or modified from one year to the next? Like whether that's a pet fee or a cleaning fee or a, I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever,
sure.
paying
Yeah,
online fee, or like what kind of fees are there? And
yeah,
do
I mean,
they,
things could change. Like we hadn't raised our parking in 15 years, so we raised our parking for this year. We are grandfathering older residents in, but for new residents that had changed. So that wouldn't be a great example because it wouldn't be on a renewal. We usually like grandfather people in, but I mean anybody could change anything at any time, right? Like you could change your lockout fee as costs of labor go up to pay an on-call person to come in overnight. You know, you may change your lockup fee. The leases usually specify the late fees. But I don't think it's you know, major terms of leases don't usually change. But we just want to make sure that we are providing for tenants to have the information before they respond. Yes, sorry, this still works for us. We would like to renew.
okay, thank you. And can you help me understand the next comment? You know, of their own will means for, you know, in other words, the tenant intends not to renew the next year. It's the graduating senior and they've taken a job. They know they're not going to need it. So that would be of own free will kind of thing, intentionally done. Just share your thoughts about what landlords might do to abuse that by way of examples or concerns.
My concerns about well, I mean our goals here with the language is how do we reduce the pressuring and how do we reduce the so part of my whole problem with leasing timelines is when one friend starts looking and leasing and is hearing that they have a unit in whatever capacity, whether it's waitlist or whatever, then their other friends are like, oh, everyone's looking. That's what happens, right? So if you have landlords saying, hey, I think I remember you're a senior, you're leaving, right? In September, and then saying, oh, well, the tenant told me they were leaving, so I can lease it, then someone is starting to lease that unit in September. And that's where we start with the problems of like getting the leasing ball rolling. In addition to the fact that a landlord could always say that they, you know, that person's not like it just starts everything early. If there's no reason why leasing needs to start that early for either party, neither one.
Well,
so
leasing to another tenant can't start until a certain deadline under the statute. I appreciate your concern that the market pressures, the anxiety, the rush to the market starts. But under the ordinance, the terms, the landlord can't right now lease it to somebody else until a certain day.
But until
another tenant.
Or if the person is leaving of their own free will, right? I mean,
right.
They can't, and so that's where that comes in. If so-and-so's telling you, yeah, I'm definitely a senior, I'm not going to renew, and that's in September, and you're starting to find a replacement tenant, you are then starting to lease way before anyone needs to be leasing and outside of the cycle. So we don't understand why that has to happen, right? Like this is not a leasing market where you can't give me an excuse as a landlord that I feel like I need to jump on this in September for the next August because something's going to sit empty. Like those are just not realities. I mean, I can post an apartment and it's almost 100% of the time leased within 1 week here in Ann Arbor. That's the market that we're dealing with. So we don't understand why we can't just say you cannot approach tenants about renewal until X day. I don't understand why we can't do that. And I think I'll defer to any renters or Kim or Zachariah who were at that meeting, but Why are we making exceptions for starting to lease at 11 months before a lease ends? In some cases, if a landlord is to say, hey, you're a senior, right? That's where we're coming from with that. Does that make sense, or is there anything else anybody wants to fill in?
Yeah, I'll second that. I don't see how it significantly benefits the landlord to know that far in advance that they're going to be finding a new tenant if they can very consistently fill it just later on, probably for the same price, if not more. And I don't personally have a problem with that scenario where somebody who's absolutely certain that they don't want to renew says, I don't want to renew. But like Jordan, I'm a little concerned that leaving that door open will allow for bad actors to take advantage of tenants. And, I'm not positive what of one's own free will really means. Like if there's a financial incentive to give it to tell the landlord yes or no early on, is that of your own free will? I would think that there's a strong argument that it could be, right? Because it's not forced, but if there's a really strong, it's kind of like the early bird special, they could choose not to give a decision, but there's a great financial incentive to do that very early on. And I'm afraid that we might face a similar type of situation with that.
Thank you. All right, I appreciate all your comments. If you have specifics, share them to Kristen or to council members Radina and Harrison and Kristen Vanderluck, or specific examples are like, oh yeah, I forgot about this riser. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what they're going to do. Feel free, or specifics, so that when I get with my colleagues, we can kind of take that into mind for any changes. Does that sound okay?
And I'm just wondering, what do you think the timeline is for some of these changes?
Do you want them to come back to you, or is this something that should go? I guess I'll ask you, Councilmember Radina. Is this something you want to come back before this body in a public comment, or give them to you and you can disseminate it to them?
Yeah,
informationally.
At this point, I think we've gotten a lot of feedback, and I think we have a good sense of where folks are headed. I'm comfortable with us taking that feedback, and if there's something that we're, definitely not going to be able to accomplish, bringing that back. But I think I'm mostly aligned here with all of the comments that have been made. So I'm comfortable hoping that it keeps things moving more quickly,
Okay.
taking the feedback, working on it with you and Cynthia, and then moving on to the next step.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments about these two sections and the amendments? Okay, great. So with that, we can move on to item 7A. We have a presentation from the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid-Michigan. Where's Pam? Okay, Pam's been promoted. So you can take it away, Pam. Introduce yourself. We're very excited to have you here. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me. Let me get this light kind of more normal. Hi, Gail. Gail's on our board of directors. And John Reiser, I've talked to you on the phone, but we've never met.
Hello.
Someone's going to post some slides for me, so I can talk about them. Great. We're the Fair Housing Center. I'm Pam Kish. I'm the director of the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid-Michigan. Next slide. We're a private nonprofit organization and we covered 10 counties. We started off as the Fair Housing Center of Washtenaw County, but now we cover 10 counties, but 44% of our complaints are from Washtenaw County properties. Next. Fair housing laws. The Fair Housing Act is a great law, but it's not self-enforcing, as most laws are not. So we brought together the NAACP in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor and the Housing Law Reform Project, along with other community members. And we started in 1989 to plan an organization that would protect people, their civil rights, if they've been discriminated against or thought they've been discriminated against in the rental sale or financing of housing. And we opened our offices in Ann Arbor in 1992. Next. We take and result, there's a lot of, you probably know the difference, but a lot of people think we're a tenants union, but we don't really deal with landlord-tenant issues. We take and resolve complaints of illegal housing discrimination, and we fill the evidence gap. So really commonly, someone comes to us and she says, calls us on the phone. She said, I was going back and forth, on Facebook or Craigslist and with the landlord, and everything seemed fine. We had an appointment. I had an appointment today to see the apartment, and I went over at the time, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just rented my last apartment. I left, but I'm Black, and I can't help think that perhaps my race had something to do with him not having any apartments left." So we would take a complaint in that situation, because obviously she doesn't have a recording of this. There were landlords, people who are interested in discriminating are very stealth about it. They're not going to say, well, oh, I thought you were white, so now I don't want to rent to you. It's often with a smile and a handshake. So next slide. And I'll talk more about the kinds of investigations we do. So we take over 200 complaints every year. The most common complaints we get are based on race, disability, and source of income, especially in places like Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti that have ordinances preventing discrimination on the basis of source of income. Next slide. Federal law covers, all the things you would expect. Sex discrimination is now includes sexual orientation and gender identity. And familial status is just a fancy way to say you have children under the age of 18 living in your household. Next. And then we have Michigan law that adds age and marital status. So you can't be discriminated against because you're too young or too old, or because you are married or unmarried. Next. Obviously in Ann Arbor, we've got source of income, student, non-student status. And some local ordinances have criminal background. So that's also something that's also in some situations covered under federal law, but I'll get to that. Fair housing law covers the rental, sale, or financing of housing and otherwise making housing unavailable. So, we've been involved in suing or taking action against insurance companies who say, well, you're a landlord, I won't give you insurance if you rent to undergrads, or I won't rent to you, we won't cover your insurance if you rent to someone who has a Section 8 voucher. Next. There are three main services that we provide: testing, investigations, and reasonable accommodations. So I will describe testing. Next slide. This is Manali Nagale. She was a student at Michigan State University. Her senior year, she wanted to live on her own. She found this place at Grad Apartments. She went to look at it. The owner it was unusual that he talked to her for a long time about all his theories about race and national origin and all this kind of stuff, but he offered to rent her an apartment. And then she called him back the next day and said, I just want to make sure, in terms of the utilities, I want to make sure I'm not paying, the water or utility bills for the person who lived there before I did. And he got really frustrated with her and said, forget it, I'm not renting to you. So she contacted us, and we did what's called testing, which is, I don't know if people have heard of testing, raise your hands. Okay, so we in this case, we sent out a black tester and a white tester. both pretending that they were living on their own, wanted a, one bedroom or studio apartment, wanted to move in August or September. Everything about them is about the same, but on paper, the black tester is just a little bit more qualified, makes a little bit more money, maybe has a job that requires more education. So on paper, a property owner would choose the black prospective tenant. So I'm going to show you the results of this testing. Next slide. The white tester was told about 3 available apartments. The owner showed the white tester all 3 apartments. And the owner told the tester that he talked to her on the phone and that was all he needed for an application process. The black tester was told about 1 available apartment that was in total chaos. He showed the black tester 0 units, and he told the black tester he would have to follow up with where she lived before, which sounds perfectly normal, except when you compare it to the white person who was told, oh, I talked to you on the phone, that was enough. So these are really stark differences in treatment between a black tester and a white tester. So that we would call that's evidence of discrimination based on race. And I'll tell you how that ended, but our testers have no skin in the game. They are not, these are, when we send out someone on a test, they don't know necessarily if they're testing for race or kids or student status or whatever. We just send them out and say, go to this place at this time. Here's your little biography that we've made up for you, and go ask about an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment for November 1st. And then they report back to us. And then in the office, we make a comparison between the 2 tests, were they treated the same way? This is an example of an investigation. Sarah Yoder contacted us and said she was emailing with a landlord about a small house, and she went to look at the house, knocked on the door, landlord wasn't there. She walked around the house, knocked on the door again, and he had been there the whole time watching her. And she looked at the house and she liked it. And when she got home, she texted him and said, I am interested in the house, but is the rent negotiable? And he said, the rent's negotiable if you do a strip tease for me in the dress you were wearing yesterday, we can negotiate on the rent. And she texted back, absolutely not, I'm not interested. And then he just turned on her, started saying really rude things about her. And here we have it, it's all on text message. So she came into the office, we used whatever magic tricks the staff has that I don't know how to use to preserve all the evidence on her phone. We did a background check to see if the landlord had a criminal record. Did he have, any kind of criminal sexual conduct in his background? Any other kind of violence? And so we sort of put the whole package together. And then I'll tell you later how that resolved. But that was an investigation. All right, next. Okay, a reasonable accommodation. So fair housing law says treat everybody the same. But when it comes to disability, you have to bend the rules to make it fair for the person with a disability. So this is the Ray family. The daughter sitting in the middle was now using a wheelchair, and she was in rehab, and she couldn't go home. She couldn't go home because her family lived on in a second floor apartment with no elevator. So as a reasonable accommodation, we wrote a letter to the landlord and said, she can't come home because she can't get into the apartment. Could you please let this family out of their lease without a penalty? And he said, yes, of course I will do that. So that's what a reasonable accommodation can be, all kinds of things. I need my own parking space. I have an emotional support animal. My Social Security comes later. I get my Social Security check later in the month. So I don't want to be charged late fees, and I'm not allowed to work because I'm too disabled to work. Can't catch up, but get a month ahead. Okay, next slide. HUD guidelines said that no landlord can have a blanket no felony policy for those who have criminal records. The next slide. Pretty obvious that in the United States, the criminal justice system leans so much more heavily on people of color that HUD has recognized that having a blanket no felony policy is going to have a disparate impact on Black and Latino prospective renters. And so it makes it, again, it's considered a form of discrimination based on race or national origin. Next. Complainant options. So Manala Nagali and Sarah Yoder, we had strong evidence for Manala Nagali that yes, race played a role in the way she was treated. And with Sarah Yoder, we had a very strong case that we had put together. Obvious clear evidence that this was sexual harassment by a landlord to a prospective tenant. So at that point, we say to people who've been the victims of discrimination where we have evidence, we offer them conciliation, which means someone from our office, usually me, calls the landlord and says, we have evidence of discrimination. Would you like to work something out with the tenant before they take any further action? It almost never works. I think once we got a tenant, she wanted to move into a place near EMU and she had a baby. They said they don't take kids and she really needed the place. And so we conciliated an agreement where she could move in for a 1-year lease with 6 months free rent. The other possibilities are filing a complaint with a state or federal agency. In this case, HUD is the federal agency and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights is the state agency. And if there's good evidence in a case, we will kind of walk people through that process. We'll help them fill out the forms. We will advocate for them in the process because HUD and MDCR they're not advocates. They're just they're neutral third parties trying to come up with a solution. And then the third option is litigation. So I'm not a lawyer. We have a list of lawyers who have experience in civil rights law, and they like our cases because we're handing them basically a case that's been investigated. There's strong evidence, and it just needs to be filed, and there needs to be a lawsuit. But again, we don't make those decisions. Those decisions come from our clients, complainants. Next. So this case settled for $20,000, which I think is low, but it was in the Western District of Michigan. She wasn't sure she wanted to, it was her senior year of college. She wasn't sure she wanted to do this. So the Fair Housing Center as an organization, we have standing to take action because our job, our mission, and our membership, our mission is to end illegal housing discrimination. Also, testers, even though this tester had no interest in, I think she owned a house, no interest in living in an apartment near MSU, she had to endure, 35 minutes of this guy going on and on about his stereotypes about race. And it was really unpleasant. She also had the right to take action against this landlord. So the Fair Housing Center and the tester filed the lawsuit, and then Ms. Nagali eventually joined us, and it settled for $20,000. Next slide. This is a case, I think we may have missed it. Do we miss a slide? Can you go back one? Maybe we didn't. Okay. Sarah Yoder's case settled for an undisclosed amount. And hopefully this guy's not sexually harassing anybody anymore. This is just to talk about how broad the Fair Housing Act is. It was a white couple, and they were living in Adrian Manor Apartments in Adrian, Michigan, and they were moving to California. And the landlord said to them, if you know anybody, as long as they're white, who might want the apartment, let me know. So they were appalled to hear this. They immediately called us. We did testing, got strong evidence, and they actually had the right to sue. If you're white and you find out that your landlord discriminates against people based on race, you can sue because you're being denied the right of interracial association. And it's embarrassing to find out that you live in a place that has been segregated without your knowledge. So that case settled for $15,000 that went to the NAACP in that area. Next slide. New construction. Anything built, new construction now, if in a building without an elevator, that's not a townhouse, every unit on the first floor has to have basic visibility. So if there's a new apartment complex being built in Ann Arbor, down the street. It can't have any steps to the front door. You have to be able to get in the front door, through the unit, out the back door, into the bathroom, do a 360. The walls have to be plugged. There's just a whole list of things that have to be there in an effort to make all new housing basically visitable as opposed to barrier free. So this is Mike Lowry. He called us and saying he was having problems with his barrier free unit. So, we went to look at it and we thought, like, this whole place has been built incorrectly. So we tried to work something out with them, that didn't work. He chose to go to litigation. They had to do, pay him. And they also had to do probably, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of retrofitting all these units. The Fair Housing Center got involved because there was a building with an elevator that Mike Lowry didn't live in, and every unit in the elevator building had to adhere to these 7 visitability rules, and they did not. Next slide. Retaliation. Tenants are very fearful of retaliation. Sometimes landlords will say, if you call the Fair Housing Center, you'll be evicted. If you ask, you were asking for to have an emotional support animal, don't you dare, because if you do, I'll find a reason to get rid of you. I won't renew your lease. So this is Harry Tyus. He's disabled. He got his Social Security check on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and he'd been racking up late fees. So he was being evicted for late fees. Goes to legal aid in Ann Arbor, and legal aid and the Fair Housing Center. I had asked Fairway Trails, let Mr. Tyus pay his rent after the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And the lawyer wrote back and said, well, that wouldn't be fair to other people. So again, you treat everybody the same, but when it comes to people with disabilities, you have to bend the rules, and they refuse to bend the rules. So it goes to court in front of a local judge, and the legal services attorney says, the judge says in court to Fairway Trails, you will allow Mr. Tyus to pay his rent after the 3rd Wednesday of the month. The lawyer at that point said on the record, that's okay, he won't be living here much longer anyway. Basically saying, yeah, he thought he's going to get away with this. Well, we're not going to renew his lease. So it was on the record. Once there's retaliation, the Justice Department gets interested. So we went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is a case where it also had gone to HUD, had been in a lot of different sort of places. The owners offered him $300. He said, no, thank you. He opted to go with the Justice Department, and it very quickly settled for $50,000, and he bought himself a house. Next slide. Sexual harassment. A lot of people don't think of necessarily, well, we talked about Sarah Yoder, think of sexual harassment. You call a Fair Housing Center, people don't know who to call. And that's what happened. There was a group of young women, and they just kept calling people, and like no one could do anything for them. So they finally found us. So sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination under fair housing law. And this was many years ago, like 24 years ago, I think 25. And it was a house with 6 separate leases, 6 separate bedrooms, owned by a couple, and their son was kind of the handyman. And what turned out to happen was that he was in the house all the time. He only rented to women. He left sexual objects all over the house. He watched pornography in the common areas of the house. And these women would complain to the owner, his parents, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry about him." They ignored their complaints. So we did an investigation. We talked to a lot of women who had lived there, previously, or some of these women didn't know each other, and we had pretty clear evidence that this was a pattern of Scott Myers. So they opted for litigation, and it settled for a lot, $166,000, split between 5 women. But they also got the judge to tell the Myers family that they may never be involved in real estate again. They had to sell the house. You can't be a real estate agent. You can't be a rental agent. You can't own property. Nothing. And that was a huge victory. Aside from the money, that was a big victory too. Next. This is another investigation where it was a mobile home park, and this is the Scott family. There was some kind of issue between one of these daughters and a white teenager. These are all teenagers, a teenager that also lived in the mobile home park. So the white mother of the white teenager decided that she decided to physically assault this black teenager when she got off the school bus. So the police were called, the woman was arrested and charged with assault. And after that happened, the manager went to the white family, asked what happened, took their side of the story, and sent an eviction notice to the black family. So we worked very closely with legal services and one of our cooperating attorneys to make sure that they didn't get evicted. And then we waited for, the trial court who convicted this woman of assault, this white woman of assaulting a black teenager. And then the white family was evicted, and they dropped the eviction for the Scott family, and they paid them an undisclosed settlement. But that's, I'm sure that happens a lot more than we hear about. Next slide. I don't think it's going to work, but this is a clip of the landlord telling our tester. You can try it. I don't think it'll work. If you click on that thing, let's see. No. Okay. So this is Celia Pippins, and she went to look at an apartment she had 2 kids. She went to look at an apartment by herself. They gave her an application, and she's getting toured around, and they said, oh, by the way, do you have kids? And she said, yeah, I have 2 kids. And they took the application out of her hand and said, we don't rent to people with kids. So when she contacted us, we weren't sure, was it race? Was it kids? Was it both? So we ended up sending a black tester and a white tester, both posing as like just a married couple, to see what the response was. And she said to both the black tester and the white tester, it's quiet here. We don't rent to people with kids. She opted for litigation. It settled very quickly for $20,000. Okay, next slide. There's a lot of overlap between evictions and fair housing cases. So we have stories of women who are evicted. They've been the victim of domestic violence. And so they're evicted because we had a case against when there was an Ypsilanti Housing Commission. Woman was attacked by a former partner. He did damage, and he physically assaulted her, and she was injured, and they sent her an eviction notice. You cannot punish women for for being the victim of domestic violence, basically. And you can't evict a woman because she calls the police too much, because she has been the victim of stalking or domestic violence. Families are evicted after the birth of a new child. They're saying, oh, well, you've got too many people in the apartment. A newborn baby really doesn't take up much space. A black family or a tenant is evicted after a conflict with a white family, like the Scott family. A person with a disability is evicted for noise or behavior related to their disability. So we get a lot of calls, like someone has a mental emotional disability, and they had to change insurance company. So they're taking a different medication, and it's not working for them. And so they are up all night making noise, or they're doing things that would get someone who wasn't disabled immediately evicted. So we will write a letter. If we can show a before and after, we'll say, look, this person has a disability. They had to change insurers. They were taking a medication that didn't work for them. Now they're back on the correct medication, and this won't happen again. We're asking for a second chance. And again, because the Fair Housing Act, you bend the rules for people with disabilities. This is a common thing we ask for. Tenants who are evicted because they've made a fair housing complaint to a civil rights organization, or a tenant who's evicted after a new management discovers an old felony record. And they just say, oh, sorry, we just don't take anybody with a felony. All right, next slide. These are we don't normally hear things, that are that you would recognize as race discrimination. It's more like, just rented the last unit, I lost your application, your credit isn't good enough. Again, these things all sound plausible, but that's where testing is so important to see, is it really that they rented the last apartment? Did they really lose your application? Is it really that your credit isn't good enough? We also talk to employees and take cases for employees who are fired because they refuse to discriminate. Or someone new, like a new owner comes in and they want to change the demographics of the property. And so they just start to find like just nothing reasons to evict people of color. And then another really insidious form of discrimination that we're seeing, form of race discrimination, is just pretending or just not doing repairs until the person is so frustrated and there's so many repair problems that they just end up moving out. So, I've got a leaky, the sink is leaking, the toilet's leaking. They go in, they kind of pretend they're fixing it, but they don't. All right, next slide. Disability. We only rent to working people. We don't take third-party payments or refuse to allow a cosigner. Things like, no, you can't have a reserved parking space. We don't do that for anybody. No, you can't have an emotional support animal or a guide dog. We just don't allow dogs on these wood floors. So those are the kinds of things we might hear when it's disability. Next slide. Familial statuses. People are pretty open about this. They're like, we're just not set up for children. Or a brother and a sister can't share a bedroom. There's some weird rumor out there that a boy and a girl over the age of 5 can't share a bedroom. I know it comes from protective services and social work, but that landlord should not be telling anybody who sleeps where. If a unit isn't safe for children, they should fix it because it's probably not safe for other people either. And none of these are legal reasons to deny somebody an apartment or a house. Okay, next slide. Let's actually go to the next slide. It's old. It's from probably from 2000 or 2010. This is a dot map of the racial segregation in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti in Washtenaw County. Red dots delineate Asian tenants. Blue dots are white tenants or residents. Green dots are Latino residents, and red dots. I'm going to get this wrong. Blue dots are white people. Green dots are Black people. Brown dots are Latino people, and red dots are Asian. And this is this is a visual of segregation in Washtenaw County. So let's go back a slide. So we always encourage people to call us if they think they've been the victim of discrimination, even if it's, they're not sure, maybe it's landlord-tenant law, maybe it's not. We always encourage people to err on the side of calling us, and we'll help people figure out, is this a fair housing claim or is there another organization that can better help them? So that is, that's it. I'm happy to take any questions that people have if you have time.
Pam,
Yes.
like how many cases do you get a year or?
Last year we had like 240 or something. So we've seen a big jump like post-COVID.
Do you know what the percentages are, like based, complaints based on race, disability, and other things?
Yeah, it's maybe 20 to 30% race, and then 30 to 40% disability, and then there's like 2 or 3% of everything else. Like national origin, religion, kids. Again, maybe 10% of the complaints now in the last couple of years have been based on source of income.
I know there was a state level law or bill rather to ban source of income discrimination. And I saw that it passed the Michigan Senate. Has it been going anywhere? Or is it stalled at the moment?
Stalled. Yeah.
Okay. So do you know where that bill is now?
I don't know. I mean, somebody just asked us this, and it's just, I don't know if there's a timetable or what is going on with it. I mean, we're in litigation right now in Ann Arbor on a source of income. I mean, one of the unique things about Ann Arbor, which you probably know, is that if there's a violation of a city ordinance, you have the right of private action. So you can actually go into court yourself. You don't have to rely on the city attorney to take the case up for you. So right now we're working with the University of Michigan civil litigation clinic, and we filed a case, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago, based on source of income.
I don't know if you're talking about a different bill, Zachariah, but the one introduced by Representative Morgan is in the House Judiciary Committee. And so I don't know that the House has plans to act on it or not, but it has been referred to the House Judiciary Committee if folks are looking to contact people in support of that. And State Representative Jason Morgan from Ann Arbor is the one who introduced it.
Thank you. Yes, I see a hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. When you have 200 complaints a year, are all of them are real, or maybe some of them are not really works at all? Because some of the people maybe just to complain and not that real, not based on the truth, not always so. So is there any percentages for those complaints that really happened truthfully and really cause people troubles? Or sometimes and not always so?
We take everybody at face value. They say, I think I've been discriminated against because of my race, because I have kids, and we do an investigation. So if there's no evidence, there's not much we can do. And there are plenty of people who are discriminated against, and we do an investigation, but we just don't get strong enough evidence. So there's nothing we can do there. But we'll, I mean, I don't think people waste their time calling government agencies to complain about things that didn't happen to them. I think people have better things to do.
Just curious, you may have mentioned this, but how large of a staff do you have?
7.
7, okay. And the testers, are they employed full-time or?
They're employees, but they're on an as-needed basis.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. I guess I have 2 questions for you here. First of all, what can municipal institutions like the Renters Commission do to help your organization? And building off of that, is there a wish list of laws that that you have that you wish all local, all municipalities would implement?
Yeah, I wish every municipality had the right of private action and covered things like Section 8 vouchers, any kind of, housing subsidies. I'd have to kind of look at there. I've gone to a conference a few times with kind of progressive fair housing people, and there's this group in New Jersey that they have this, I'd have to go look at their list of all the things that they've changed in the law in New Jersey. And there's a group in New York too that are just really pro-tenant. Again, I mean, obviously we don't deal with necessarily with landlord-tenant law, but a lot of this discrimination comes out of landlord-tenant law, illegal evictions, refusing to repair things, keeping people out of housing. So there are, a lot of things that I would like to see, but I'm not really prepared to answer that. I mean, what I do want is that those of you who are talking to, I assume you're on this commission because you are interested in the rights of people who are renters and that you come into contact with people. People call you for advice. And so I want people to know that the Fair Housing Center exists and we are open and we want to talk to people. And I also will just throw in that if they call a government agency first, like this just happened today, someone called the Michigan Department of Civil Rights before they called us. Race discrimination case, perfect for us to test. Would have gotten strong evidence based on what they were telling us. But the Michigan Department of Civil Rights is obligated to contact the owner within a certain number of days. So once you call the owner, you can't really do you can't really do an undercover investigation. So we were just on the phone with MDCR saying, like, this is a perfect example. Call us first. You know, I don't care who pays for the investigation. Just call us so we can do right by this woman who is probably, so, you know, that's just a frustration.
You're listed on our website. The Fair Housing Center is listed on our website. I noticed though that we don't have a link to your website. We just have your phone number. So maybe we need to change that.
Yeah. I mean, Gail knows what we do. The other thing is, we haven't been funded by the city of Ann Arbor in, like, I don't know, 15 years. Whenever it used to be, for those who are old enough to remember, it used to be that nonprofit organizations could apply and could get funding from the city of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County. And then they turned it into this, like, other thing that was all through Washtenaw County. And we were cut out of that. I mean, we don't really fit in neatly with, we're not a breakfast program. We don't deal with homelessness. We don't provide shelter. We're kind of an odd duck in that way. And so we have really almost no local funding. So that would be, also helpful, even if it's just a tiny bit, even if just so people see that the city of Ann Arbor, supports, fair housing and equal opportunity. John Reiser.
Hi, thanks for your work on behalf of that one organization. But the question I have, is it federal laws that you mostly look into, or do you do stuff for truth in renting or the housing law of Michigan or the revised Judicature Act? Is it state law or is it all federal, or is it, I know Elliott Larson is a state, but how about landlord tenant, statutes?
We don't deal with, we work really closely with legal services, so because sometimes there's overlap. A racially motivated eviction is a fair housing case, but it's also a sort of an emergency fair housing case. Emergency landlord tenant case. So they're clearly overlapped, and we work with legal services. Sometimes there are elements of landlord tenant issue, there are landlord tenant issues kind of woven into a fair housing issue, but we would not work with or take a complaint that is just a landlord tenant case. We don't do that. And we deal with the Federal Fair Housing Act, the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, the Michigan Persons with Disabilities Act, and then any local ordinances where we cover that jurisdiction.
How about a landlord who's squeezing all the tenants unfairly or in a certain manner, something like that, like class action type or something like that? Nope.
No, we deal with, again, is it a violation of the Fair Housing Act? I was telling someone today, all kinds of things are unethical, unfair, crappy,
Okay.
Unfriendly, but they're not violations of fair housing law by themselves.
I think I missed it a moment or something didn't click. You said that you do about like 200 and some thousand cases. Was that
200 and like 240 cases. So each case, each case is, has to be investigated, and some are tested, some are writing letters of reasonable accommodation, some go to litigation, some, there's all kinds of avenues we help people take when there's evidence.
And over the past several years, how many were from Ann Arbor? And do you think that it's because people just don't know to report it, or if it's that we may not just be having those issues?
Housing discrimination is everywhere. So it's, I mean, HUD does every 10 years, HUD does a big study in cities and towns all over the country, and it's all the same. Ann Arbor has just as much housing discrimination as anywhere else. But we get the most complaint when there's the most, if there's a lot of rental housing, so rental housing turns over every year, there's the highest level of opportunity to discriminate. So if there's a big rental market, we get a lot of complaints. So we do get a lot of complaints from Ann Arbor because there's a lot of rental housing in Ann Arbor. I didn't bring that, I have Washtenaw County statistics. Again, because we're not funded by the city, otherwise we would have, I have the statistics, but I'm not sort of looking through them to say, and I could actually, if you want me to follow up, I can tell you how many City of Ann Arbor complaints we've taken in the last year or two and what kind of complaints they were.
I think that might be, a good thing for the group to look at or to know, right?
Yeah, my guess is it's going to be similar to the rest of the county and all the counties we cover. It's going to be race, disability, and source of income. And Ann Arbor is going to be even more heavily source of income because you have a local ordinance. But yeah, a lot of people don't call us because they think, well, they don't know that we're not a government agency. Anyone who's called a government agency, sorry if you work for a government agency, but it's not, you don't usually get any kind of meaningful relief. But if you call the Fair Housing Center and we do an investigation, we can get people significant relief. And, over the years, it's like $3.6 million in settlements that we've helped people get, through litigation and other kinds of negotiations that we've done.
When you're going through your data, are you looking at private homeowner landlords versus property management companies? And
that would be, yeah, I could, yes, but that is really time consuming to go through, look at every complaint in Ann Arbor. And again, it's kind of all over the place. We get complaints from big companies and small companies. We get complaints, again, mom and pop, medium size, we hear kind of, there's allegations of discrimination, at all levels kind of the housing industry.
And is it I figure I already know the answer. Is it, because I was going to say, is it concentrated in one part of Ann Arbor? But I kind of figure just everywhere, it's everywhere else in the country, it's just kind of everywhere.
It is. It's everywhere. All right. I think that probably wraps it up. Thank you so much for inviting me. And please don't hesitate to send people our way. And I will send the last year of Ann Arbor complaints. I'll get you some. Who should I send that to? The information about Ann Arbor complaint data?
You could send it to the Renters Commission email address.
Okay, I'll get that.
Kristen, either or. And
okay, I have Kristen's email, so I'll send it to Kristen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you so much.
Pam. Thank you so much, all you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for all the thoughtful questions. Very happy that we could have Pam in to talk about all that. Okay, we can move on now to actually, before we move on, Kristen, could we have the link put on our website? I know we have the Fair Housing Center. We have apparently the phone number, it sounds like, but we don't have the link to their website.
I just emailed it to you guys.
Perfect. I just already updated it, so it's good to go.
That was very fast. Thank you so much. Okay.
We're otherwise paying attention to the meeting, though.
Okay, we'll move on to 7-B, discussion of the city written section of rights and duties of tenants booklet. Julia, would you like to introduce this?
Sure. At the last meeting when we were talking about Gail was giving the overview of security deposits, I think Rosanita, somebody asked if the protections for victims of domestic violence or the security deposit law about if you get into senior housing, being able to break, your lease and not losing your deposit, if that was in the booklet, in the white section of the booklet. And it's, I read through it and Jamie read through it. Neither one of us saw it. So I'm going to say it's not in there. So we would like to see it added next time there's an update. And then the only other thing about updating the booklet is I was wondering if I think in the white section now it says the dates it was updated. And if it could just say the date that, after the landlord section and after the tenant section, if those were dated, I think it would read a little bit easier for people if they realized that those two sections were really old.
Well, somebody send me those two other pieces, the security deposit and then the other one to me, and then I can work with John and others in the clerk's office to kind of format it into the booklet for next time. They also just did a printing. And so unless there's huge demand, I don't anticipate another printing until probably close to the end of the year. So, but we will put it on the list.
Gail, is that easy for you to send those pieces to her?
Yeah, I'll double check with you that I know what you're talking about, which ones you're talking about before I do. You're talking, yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay, great.
And I don't know, I guess, if an update's probably not happening, for another year or so, that people can just remember if something else pops up like that they feel is missing, that, there is a chance sometime to change it.
You want the whole security deposit law in there? Is that what you're saying?
No, it gives the generic description of the security deposit that it did when the booklet was written in 1980 or something. But
Okay.
and I think around 90 there was an update for domestic violence.
Okay.
Victim.
Yeah.
And an update for seniors.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pull it up and send it.
Thanks.
John?
Can I ask a question about this booklet and how tenants usually get it? I know it's provided a lot of times via email. Sometimes it's included in a lease. They're required to provide physical copies that we print. So how do most tenants get this and use it? And are we doing it the best way for tenants? And that's rhetorical. I don't know if there's a right answer. People might. So what's your sense of that? Because this comes from a 1978 charter provision where, computers were new back then. So I'm just wondering what the sense of this body is with respect to the rights and duties of tenants booklet and how to best help tenants get it, understand it, and use it.
My sense is that a good chunk of tenants have never heard of it, and then landlords don't do anything about it. My past 3 landlords didn't give it to me or say anything about it.
I sometimes see it attached to, like, if a lease is emailed or sent electronically to a tenant, it's kind of at the bottom. And they just look through it to see if there's anything they need to sign or not. And
Yeah. I've also spoken to a number of tenants who have not received a physical copy. I've thought about it quite a bit, and I am in favor of continuing to provide or require a physical copy, because I think it's more accessible to older tenants, for one, and it's more conspicuous. It's not something that you can just scroll past as easily. You know, it's handed to you, or so at least it's supposed to be. And in order to, I think the main problem is making sure that landlords really do follow that rule. And it sounds like more are, but we probably have a ways to go. And Jordan.
Yeah, we have it both in our electronic lease, go over it at lease signing and give them physical copy as well. So we're doing both and going through all of the different items that are in it. We don't like fully walk through every page, obviously, but I spend a good 3 minutes talking about it at our lease signing. So some of us are really making sure that tenants do have access to that information best we can.
Thanks, Jordan. Bob and Gail.
Yeah, it'd be much the same story. We provide for a physical copy when we can, but we've had tenants who rented from out of state, so they got a electronic copy along with, you know, the thing of really read this. It's important. You need to know it. But I think maybe that's an exception. I don't know. It seems like a good idea to me.
I guess, I mean, I want tenants to read it too, but the idea of having all these paper copies seems like environmentally not a great thing. But that's just my 2 cents. I mean, I don't know if students are or tenants are gonna read them anymore if they have hard copies of it than if it's electronically provided. So I'm not sure. But that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks. I'm not pitching anything, and I'm just wondering what's the best way to do it in this era to get the information to tenants so that they can use it, so that they read it, so it's comprehensible. You know, we spell out what font it has to be and what color the paper has to be. And then what difference does green paper make if they're not given copies anyway? So how do we get it to them? And does it need to be in the charter? I mean, can't we just do it with an ordinance that says, hey, if we can do an ELO through an ordinance or right to renew in an ordinance, I mean, I don't know. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Anything else on changing what's in the booklet? Okay. And just a reminder, you can find a digital copy online on our website. Thank you, Kristen, or whichever staff member put this together. I'm guessing it was Kristen. It looks really nice. I love the image and everything. It's great. Okay. We can move on to 7-C now. Planning for the February 15th, 2024 meeting. So before we get into what will be on the agenda, I know we've spoken about doing an in-person meeting. Do you all feel that February would be a good month to do it, or should we shoot for March or later or never?
March would be better for me with the February election coming up.
Of course. Rosanita?
Since it's in the evening and after dark, I probably won't be there, but I would say that you might want to look more towards spring because of just how Michigan winters are.
That's a fair point. Thank you, Rosanita. Any other thoughts?
I agree. I think we should wait till it's a little warmer.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we can revisit this conversation at our next meeting or, a couple of meetings from now. Once it starts warming up and the primaries are behind us. Okay. Let's see, which obviously don't forget to vote. So for our agenda for our next meeting, I guess I'll just open the floor here. What should we all discuss at the February meeting? I will also bring up our work plan here so we can remember the things that we wanted to work on this year. Julia.
I'd like us to have attendance on the meeting. I know we've got openings posted, but we should talk about other people who haven't been showing up to meetings.
Thank you, Julia. I think it's a great idea. And please send around the application link for the commission. I think that we could use some more applications, and we also need to make some recommendations on appointments probably soon. I can send that out to everybody. Okay,
Have we sent that out to the mailing list recently as a suggestion? Like, I think we have 500 people-ish or something last Kristen mentioned it. I wonder if it would behoove us to send the application and responsibilities out to our small mailing list.
I can do that.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Jordan, for this suggestion. All right, so any opposition to having that discussion about attendance? Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda. What else?
Maybe this is a question for Travis. Is it worthwhile for us to talk about junk fees, or do you feel kind of set in where you're going with that?
I think if we have, let me put it this way, if we have a draft ready, we will put it on the agenda. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
John?
I know there was a junk fee wait list fee committee. If there's anything specific by way that you might want included, get that to, Travis, Kristen, and Councilmember Harrison for our just consideration. If there's something specific that it should address, or if there's something, just let us know. Just share your thoughts with us if you have any in that regard. I know I already have the wait list, but if there's any additional thoughts or comments, share those.
Yeah, thank you, John. Jordan, you had sent me something about having an example of an options contract. So you may want to redact that and send it over if you feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I got it to Travis, but I will send it to, I'll black out the names and send it to John too, because it feels like a really important example of just, in this particular example, John, for a 2-bedroom apartment, students were being asked to front $5,000, which included security deposit, which they thought was not refundable. I think ultimately it is, reading it myself, but I understand why they didn't think that. And then fee that's not refundable, and in addition, rent and things before they even are given a lease. And so I think including provisions that are specifically discussing the timelines of exchange of money, like being asked to pay rent when you are not even protected by a lease, and those kind of things would be important. So maybe I'll reach out to you with some kind of specific examples and concerns I've heard also.
Right. Additional specific examples that if people want to send to the attorney's office through council members Harrison, Radina, and Kristen, liaison, are specific junk fees or fees for this or fees for that. What are the fees that landlords charge you for? A lockout fee, a pet fee, a cleaning fee, snow shoveling fee, a laundry fee. What kind of fees are there? Just so I can appreciate what some of them are.
Travis?
Yeah, I think that's all helpful context if it's helpful to John as well. But I think one of the things that Councilmember Harrison and I talked about is a desire to eliminate junk fees. So I don't know that a huge compiling of a list, if that's something that I don't want to provide or create additional work if that's not something that we're gonna need to enumerate.
No, we're not gonna. No, I just want. You're right, and I just want to kind of get a sense of the kind of things that I don't know that might be out there. If it's convenient and easy to do so. I'm not saying you need a special meeting, but if you have anything to share, feel free to. Thanks.
Just thinking about the next meeting, I mean, maybe we'd want to touch on sort of the next commissioner education session that we'd want to engage in. I thought the presentation tonight was great, so maybe thinking through what we would want to engage in next, maybe the affordable housing topic or the slowing gentrification topic, and who we would want to bring in to help to guide that discussion.
That's a great point. Does anyone have any ideas for who to invite on those two topics? I think it would be really nice to invite someone from Avalon to talk about affordable housing.
Maybe Washington Housing Alliance might be someone we could bring in as well.
Yeah.
That's a good idea that may be pertinent. Our kind of small landlord WHA coalition is actually planning kind of a connection event and also an event to inform landlords about how they can access kind of the money that's out there for Section 8 and other local programs. And I may have some more information on that by February.
Gotcha. And that's for WHA, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, Sharon Lapidus is kind of spearheading it. There are other folks that come, some mostly housing providers, but also just kind of some community organizers and stuff too. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I can. Kristen, would you prefer to? I think inviting Avalon to come to one of the next 2 or 3 meetings, within that range of meetings, would be great. Would you like me to invite them, or would you prefer to?
Either way works for me.
Okay. I can send an invitation because I just happened to run into the director of Avalon the other day. It's a pretty random encounter. So, great. All right. One other thing to add to the agenda is the complaint form for 8530 and 8531. I think that we should discuss outreach to tenants. How are we going to make tenants aware of this complaint form now that it exists? I have some ideas on that, but I think we should discuss it as a group in the February meeting. Okay, anything else? Okay. Thank you. We can, if you have any other ideas for the meeting, you can just email Kristen, me, and Julia. All right then. Also, I will be moving in a few months, so I will resign from the commission after a few months. I think probably around probably April or so. So if you're interested in becoming the chair, really encourage you to do so. I've had a good time, and so if you have any questions about it, just let me know. But be good to start thinking about it.
Can we congratulate you on your next venture?
I do not object.
Zachariah will be starting medical school in the fall. So very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited
We'll
about
miss your leadership.
Thanks. I'll miss hard. I hope we can do an in-person meeting before then, or I just want to see some before then. It'd be nice.
I think we should meet in person then. Before you
That'd be
leave.
great.
Yeah,
That made me very happy.
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, so we can move now on to item 8, reports. So 8-A, do we have a report from City Council? Beyond what you shared already?
I think you got most of what we're working on, yeah, from my perspective, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, 8-B, there's no HHSAB meeting, according to Jeff. There's nothing there. 8-C, report from staff liaison. Anything new?
I have just a couple of updates. Reported that McKinley requested about 2,000 tenants rights and duties booklets. They haven't picked them up yet, but they are ready. And they have been contacted several times that they are ready. So those should be out soon. And then we also have a really large stock right now. So they are available. And then I attended a meeting today with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations and then some other stakeholders about a federal grant that OSI is looking at. And they're looking at gearing a lot of the funding towards greening rental housing program. And so it's in the super early stage. But I expressed that the Renters Commission would be definitely interested in being a community partner. So when I have a little bit more, like when it's shaped a little bit more, I'll report more on it. That's all.
Thank you, Kristen. Any questions for Kristen? Okay, great. Thank you again. Can move on to 8-D, report from commissioners. Would any commissioners like to give a report? Okay. Great. Then lastly, we can move on to, oh no, there's actually one more after this. Item 9, the second general public comment.
Right. Any member of the public would like to address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes, you can call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941. You can also join using the web link, and that is a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting. If you have called in to speak, you can press *9 to raise your hand to be called on, or if you are joining with the web link, you can use the raise hand feature. If anybody would like to address the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, no attendees have indicated.
Okay, thank you very much, Kristen. Okay, we can move on to item 10. Now, we did receive a communication. You sent that out right before the meeting. So we can pull that up here. I have not had a chance to review this before the meeting, but here we go. Hmm. Okay, so it's a prospective student tenant who put down $150 and thought they were getting priority for a room at Varsity, right? And then there's an additional $500 beyond the 150.
I'm a little confused, but I'm trying to read it quickly.
Yeah.
But I would say, I mean, they mentioned student legal services a couple times in here. I mean, if they, I obviously don't know if they call student legal services or not, but you can refer them.
More.
If you want to just refer them back to me specifically, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can try to get more information.
Kristen, was this person referred to student legal services?
Well, they mentioned student legal services. I just don't know if they ever contacted because I don't know their name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something that this particular incident doesn't sound familiar to me. Like I've talked to someone who's had this situation, so. But it doesn't mean they didn't talk to somebody else in our office. I just think I need a little more information, but I might just be reading through it too quickly.
Sounds good. Where did they mention student legal services here?
Varsity mentions it in their response, and then it looks like the email that's on Monday, January 15, said, my parents are suggesting I report this to student legal services.
Gotcha. So there's an application fee and a reservation fee. I see. Huh. Okay. All right. Well, what should, Gail, do you want anything else to happen next? To make sure these people were connected or did connect with student legal services?
Other than just telling them that they can reach out to me, that's fine. I assume she's a senior now, or the person's a senior now. I think they said daughter. So they're still eligible for our services. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind just having them reach out to me and let them know that they were referred by the Renters Commission. And then I'm happy to talk to them and see if I can figure it out. And if there's any reason to come back to the Renters Commission about it, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, sounds good. Kristen, are you able to? Yeah, thank you. Great. Julia?
I just wanted to say that it did seem to hit upon some of the things that we've been talking about. There's also the example of they gave money in October and then in March we're told there's no unit. And just, you pay 150. Who would have thought you had to pay another 500? It is one of these miserable things where you can't. The mother says at one point, well, maybe my daughter should have read the fine print better. You can't.
Yeah.
I've gone all the things to get a lease, walk to get my keys, and they hand me a 10-page lease. And I'm like, well, this is going to take me an hour and a half to read. It's not written in English. And he just laughed and said, no, just sign it. You've got 3 minutes. So it's like, yeah, sure, I signed it because you don't have any choice.
I think it's going to get worse. Everything that you guys have said, I've heard from some of the people I know, the landlords. I just don't understand this wait list fee, which can be a lot. They are charging a lot for a wait list fee. And some landlords are like, yeah, we'll just give it back. I'm like, this person is hoping they have an apartment. It's like a supply and demand. It hits all at once with the students. Yeah.
Sorry, I just got to add one more thing about that, right? If you have to put down $500 on 4 different landlords, hoping one of them comes through, we don't have to have a workshop on gentrification because you've got to have a lot of money to just apply for housing here, let alone get something.
And I just want to repeat something that was in that report that we gave to City Council. People who are more likely to have bad credit, for example, have to apply more often. And those are the people who can least afford to apply more often when the fees are so high. So it's this impossible situation. It's really not fair, in my opinion. I know I've said that many times, but I hope that we're able to address it because I really do feel for these students and non-students who have to go through this. It's not fair. Any other thoughts on this email chain? I'm gonna read through it right after this meeting, I think, and I haven't read through the entirety of it.
The only thing that kind of, I mean, not the only thing, but what stood out was that she received responses from two different people from varsity. And while they're kind of on the same page, it's it goes back to, like you guys were saying, with the application and the rental agreements are so for the application packet can be so thick. If you're looking at all the terms and it's really small print, then you don't know exactly what you're doing or signing. And when we're looking at students, like she's a senior, but I think a lot about students who are going into their freshman year in a case like this near campus. And, you know, maybe they have parents who haven't rented in like 20 years. So there's an education piece that really needs to be there for the student and for their family on part of this.
Thank you, Rosanita. Any other thoughts about this email? Okay. So we can move on. That's the only piece of oh yeah, Rosanita. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, they did mention var to their company and another one that's called The Varsity, saying that maybe you got us confused with someone else. Um,
Yeah, I see. Looks like it's like an individual complex, maybe.
mhm. Right, because they're saying they themselves don't have a wait list.
Right. It's varsity and then varsity management.
Right. But it's a couple of paragraphs underneath that that really kind of gets me when I think it was the parent saying talking in the beginning, which is the reservation fees technically is not technically a fee, but prepaid rent as long as you sign a lease and move in, and it's refundable if the current residents were to renew. So how soon before the before are they before the residents leases up, are people joining a potentially joining a wait list for this apartment?
Good question. Sounds like from the other people, the tenants I've spoken to, sometime in November, December, January, frequently people are signing these contracts.
Yeah, and that makes it even more difficult because I know for someone's apartment, like they said, oh, we'll give you was it the letter from management came in January saying we'll knock a little bit off of your increased rent if you renew by a certain day in February, but the lease itself isn't up until close to the summer. And so that's why I'm asking, kind of wondering how far in advance are these apartment wait lists going out? Because that is pretty long to be on a wait list. Um, on a non-refundable potentially wait list if you're paying $150, $200, like you guys said, to multiple complexes and being out of that for several months. And then if you do connect to an apartment, then you've also now lost, say, if you did what, 4 other apartments, then you've lost what, $600 because it's non-refundable.
Yeah. It's not acceptable.
When can we term that a junk fee? Just a question.
I'd say right now. When can we ban the junk fees? We'll hear about that hopefully at the next meeting or the one after that, but from our council members. If you have specific thoughts about how to make sure that we include all the fees that should be classified as junk fees in the upcoming legislation, the draft ordinance, email our council members. It sounds like that's the way to make sure that that gets addressed, and John, of course. Okay. I think we good to move on. Let's see. All right, then. We can move on to item 11, adjournment. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Rosanita. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Julia. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Take care.
Good night.